In the wealthiest corner of Lakefield, Connecticut, where winding maple-lined roads hide sprawling estates built by old manufacturing dynasties, stood the Greystone Mansiona three-story colonial home with white-clapboard walls, black shutters, and a reputation whispered through New England business circles. The property belonged to Isabella Greystone, a 58-year-old widow known for her sharp judgment, impeccable taste, and iron grip on Greystone Precision Works, a factory empire that supplied aerospace and medical robotics companies across the eastern United States. Her late husband had built the company from a small machine shop, but it was Isabella who transformed it into a titan valued at nearly $1 billion. She raised her daughter Lydia Greystone alone after her husband's sudden stroke, grooming her to eventually take over the company. Lydia was brilliant, accomplished, and fiercely loyal, qualities that made her marriage to Alden Mercer feel, to many, like an odd match. Alden, 34 at the time, came from a modest background in rural Vermont. He worked as an engineer specializing in automated manufacturing systems, talented, quiet, intelligent. When Lydia brought him home for the first time, Isabella greeted him politely, but behind her calm smile, she recognized something unsettling, a sharpness in his eyes, a hunger he didn't bother disguising well. She chalked it up to ambition. Many young men showed the same when confronted with wealth they had never known. But Alden's fascination with the Greystone fortune began long before Lydia realized it.
The slow shift in the house. Every evening, the mansion carried two rhythms.
Lydia's driven, work-focused march through projects and meetings. And Alden's silent wandering, observing every corner of the house like he was mapping it for a future he had already imagined. He rarely raised his voice. He rarely showed anger. His quietness made him seem harmless, even gentle. But his mind was calculating, cold, unwavering. What he wanted wasn't Lydia. It wasn't love. It was legacy, and the Greystone fortune was his clearest path to it. He studied Connecticut's inheritance laws. He read old private trust documents. He asked casual questions about the bylaws of Greystone Precision. He even befriended Isabella's longtime financial advisor under the guise of learning more about the family business. And then he realized something. With Lydia as sole heir, his access to the Greystone empire would always remain secondary. But if another child, especially a male child, appeared, and if Alden could legally become the father of that child, he could secure generational wealth for himself, beyond anything Lydia alone could give him. That was when his plan took shape, quiet, meticulous, and monstrous. The vulnerability he needed. Isabella had been lonely for years. Her husband's death hollowed out her evenings, leaving her buried in paperwork or distracted by wine tastings, charity events, and quiet dinners with other board members. Lydia, now heavily involved in corporate strategy, traveled frequently to Boston and Chicago, leaving the mansion to Alden and Isabella during long winter nights.
Alden saw opportunity in every silence.
It began innocently. A small gesture offering to fix the fireplace when it jammed. Helping her carry heavy folders to her office. Asking about photos of her late husband with the respectful tone of a devoted son-in-law. Isabella appreciated the attention. She was not used to anyone caring for her since her husband passed. Then came evenings in the wine cellar, where Alden pretended to develop a taste for rare California cabernets. He truly listened when Isabella reminisced about skiing trips to Aspen, about the early struggles of the company, about nights she spent alone reading her husband's old engineering journals. The more she spoke, the more he leaned in, not out of compassion, but control. And though she didn't notice the shift, she relied on his presence more each week. His gentle voice.
His polite manners.
His uncanny ability to say exactly what she wished her late husband might have said. Alden could read people like a blueprint.
The night of snow.
The winter of 2009 arrived early that year, coating Lakefield in thick snow that swallowed all sound after sunset. One night, While Lydia was away on a business retreat in Seattle, the power flickered across the estate. Isabella, frustrated and slightly tipsy from drinking too much Merlot alone, called for help. Alden appeared instantly, flashlight in hand. They talked by candlelight in the living room, the storm rattling the windows. Isabella's words slurred occasionally, nothing Viola Graystoneth, loyal housekeeper, hadn't noticed before. But tonight, she admitted things she hadn't said aloud in years.
"I miss being seen," Isabella whispered. "Miss being wanted."
Alden's expression softened in a way that wasn't genuine, but expertly rehearsed. "You deserve to be cherished," he said quietly, barely above a breath. What happened afterward was a blur for Isabella. She woke the next morning in her bedroom, heart pounding, hair tangled, sheet pulled to her chest, Alden asleep beside her. Her scream caught in her throat. She covered her mouth, trembling. She wanted to run. She wanted to deny everything. But she also knew. If she exposed what happened, her daughter's life would shatter. The company's reputation would implode. The tabloids would feast on the scandal of a widow and her son-in-law.
Shame sealed her silence.
Alden knew it would.
The test and the lie.
6 weeks later, Isabella stared at a pregnancy test in her private bathroom. 2 lines. Positive. Her knees buckled. She sank onto the cold marble floor, hands trembling violently. When Alden stepped into her office that evening, having coincidentally sensed she needed him, she choked out the truth.
Her voice cracked under the weight of fear, age, and loneliness.
He didn't panic. He didn't raise his voice. He simply knelt, kissed her hand, and whispered, "We can make this work.
The child will inherit everything.
And I'll take care of you." Those words, "take care of you," were exactly the trap she needed to fall into. She believed him. And that belief allowed his plan to move forward like a silent machine. The announcement. In spring 2010, Isabella told the public she had reconnected with a long-lost lover from her youth and used IVF due to infertility. Journalist friends nodded respectfully. Board members congratulated her discreetly. Lydia cried with happiness, believing her mother finally found warmth again. Meanwhile, Alden stood in the corner during the celebration dinner, lifting a glass with the faintest, coldest smile. A smile that said, "Everything is moving exactly as I intended." For nearly 3 years after Leon's birth, the Greystone mansion existed in an odd, fragile calm. Isabella poured herself into caring for the baby she believed was her miracle child, avoiding every memory of the night that conceived him. Lydia worked tirelessly to stabilize the company as it expanded into medical robotics. And Alden, always quiet, always calculating, stood in the background like a shadow too subtle to name. But shadows eventually stretch too far. It began with something tiny.
A message left on the kitchen counter.
A web history Lydia wasn't meant to see. A late-night phone call Alden quickly silenced. Lydia wasn't suspicious by nature. Her mother raised her to trust, to believe in hard work, to keep faith in the people she loved. But Leon, her half-brother, though she didn't know if had her heart completely. He was joyful, curious, impossibly sweet, and Lydia adored him as if he were her own child. And Alden's sudden obsession with Leon's trust fund was the first thing that felt wrong. He asked too many questions. Who controls the account until Leon's 18? Should we update the guardianship documents? Has your mom chosen an interim trustee in case something happens to her? The way he tried to sound casual only amplified his intent. Lydia didn't voice her concerns at first. She buried them under the stress of mergers, board meetings, and quarterly earnings. But doubt hung over her like humidity before a storm. Things escalated the day Alden came home smelling faintly of tobacco, a habit he had never touched in all the years she knew him. When she asked about it, he dismissed her with a shrug, saying a co-worker smoked in his car. Except Lydia knew his company banned smoking anywhere near their vehicles.
She didn't argue. She simply watched. And when you watch someone without reacting, you learn everything.
The night that changed everything. One evening in late 2013, Lydia returned home early from a meeting in Hartford. She parked quietly, walked into the house, and heard murmurs coming from the dining room. Not raised voices, just the low rumble of a conversation meant to stay private.
Isabella and Alden.
She stepped closer, heart pounding.
Isabella, we can change the trust again, Alden. It would look suspicious. Alden. Suspicious to who?
Lydia barely notices anything outside work. Lydia froze. Barely notices anything? He said it without hesitation, like someone proclaiming a fact carved in stone. She leaned against the wall, her breath tight. She didn't hear the rest of the conversation, her heartbeat drowned it out, but she saw something clearly. Her husband and her mother were keeping secrets. And those secrets involved Leon's future. She left the house before they finished talking, drove aimlessly through quiet Connecticut towns, and ended up parked behind a 24-hour pharmacy with tears streaking her face. She hadn't cried like that in years, not since her father died. But this hurt differently. It wasn't grief. It was betrayal, still shapeless and confusing. She wiped her tears and made a decision she never thought she would make. She hired a private investigator. The evidence that broke her. The PI she chose was Darren Hollis, an ex-NYPD detective who ran a small office in New Haven. Lydia walked into his office with trembling hands, her voice low, ashamed to even explain why she was there. "I need you to look into my husband," she whispered. Discreetly. "Please." Darren didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply nodded, took down details, and got to work. 3 weeks later, he called her to come in. The rain that morning fell like needles, slicing across her windshield as she drove. When she entered Darren's office, he didn't offer small talk. He just handed her a thick envelope. Inside were pages of printed emails, encrypted at first, but decrypted by Darren's cybersecurity partner. They were conversations between Alden and an attorney in Zurich regarding a structure for automatic guardianship transfer in the event of Isabella's death.
Not Lydia's death.
Not both parents.
Only Isabella.
The one person standing between Alden and the Greystone Empire. But that wasn't the worst part. Darren slid a second envelope across the table. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You should see this too." Inside was a printout of a secret DNA test taken months after Leon was born. Samples from Leon. Samples from Alden. Result: 99.99% match. Lydia's pulse stopped. Her vision blurred at the edges. She didn't faint, but her body shook so violently she had to hold the armrests of the chair to stay upright.
Alden. Leon.
Her little brother was actually her husband's son. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "My mother, she didn't tell me because she wanted to protect me." Darren didn't comment. He simply offered tissues and silence. Lydia drove straight home, but she didn't storm in or confront anyone. She climbed the stairs quietly, walked into her childhood bedroom, and sat on the floor. She stayed there for hours, knees pulled to her chest, unable to process the tangled horror of it all. When she finally stood, she felt something new inside her. Cold clarity. She needed her mother.
Isabella's collapse.
Lydia found Isabella in her private library, reading financial documents. She looked up with a warm smile, so normal, so motherly that Lydia almost cried again. But Lydia didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She simply placed the DNA report and printed emails on the desk. Isabella's face drained of color. Her hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly with tears, raw, uncontrollable, devastated. She whispered Lydia's name over and over, begging for forgiveness before Lydia even spoke a word.
I am sorry, Isabella sobbed.
I wanted to protect you. I was ashamed.
I thought I could bury my mistake forever.
Lydia knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around her mother. She didn't yell. She didn't hate her.
She hated the man who orchestrated everything.
For 3 days, Lydia stayed by Isabella's side, sleeping on the floor next to her bed, refusing to leave even when Isabella tried to push her away out of guilt. They held Leon close, protecting him from everything. And in the darkest moment, when Isabella attempted to harm herself in the bathroom, Lydia broke down the door, pulled her mother into her arms and whispered,
Leon needs you.
I need you.
We survive together.
It was enough to pull Isabella back.
Exile.
That night, Lydia confronted Alden. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She stood at the top of the stairs like a judge delivering a verdict. You're leaving this house.
Tonight. You'll never see my mother again.
Alden smirked, a twisted, reckless confidence in his eyes. You can't take Leon from me, he said. He's my blood. Lydia answered with a stare so cold it felt like steel. Blood doesn't make a father. And you don't have a soul. He flinched not from guilt, but from the realization that his mask no longer worked. Within hours, security escorted him out. He carried only a single bag. That night, he withdrew $42,000 from a secret account and disappeared first to New York, then to Miami, then, according to airport cameras, to South America. From that moment, he became a ghost.
The aftermath.
Lydia filed for an emergency divorce. She presented evidence so shocking that the judge asked for a recess just to regain composure. The court stripped Alden of all parental rights except twice-yearly supervised visits Alden never used. Leon grew up happy, gentle, and blissfully unaware. Lydia and Isabella made an unspoken pact. He would know the truth. But only when he was strong enough to bear it. Their peace lasted years. Until the past clawed its way back. 14 years passed, and the Greystone mansion changed not in appearance, but in atmosphere. The once heavy silence that hung over the halls had gradually been replaced by laughter, violin music, and the constant hum of activity from a now thriving family business. The house no longer felt haunted by secrets. It felt lived in, warm, cautious but still hopeful. Leon grew into a young man who drew attention the moment he stepped into a room, not because of wealth or pedigree, but because of the strange combination of gentleness and presence that made people turn their heads. At 16, he stood 6'3", athletic from years of hockey, with long golden hair that he tied into a small ponytail when practicing violin. His blue-gray eyes mirrored Isabella's, though their intensity hinted at something deeper inside him, an unspoken intuition about the world that came from growing up around half-truths. He had no idea who his biological father was, and never questioned the story "your father died in a car accident before you were born," because Lydia and Isabella delivered it with such consistent emotion that he believed grieving was simply part of the family routine. Whenever he asked about his father, Isabella touched his cheek and whispered something vague like, "He wasn't ready to be a parent," or "He wanted you to grow up free, without his mistakes." Leon learned to accept mystery. But mystery has a way of brewing quietly, like a dormant storm waiting for a shift in wind.
The weight of legacy.
By 2027, Greystone Precision Works had ballooned into one of the largest privately owned robotics manufacturing companies in the Northeast. Lydia, now 49, was known in business magazines as the Iron Mind of Connecticut. Her leadership transformed the company into a $2 billion conglomerate with contracts in biomedical technology and space engineering. Her success came from discipline. Her discipline came from trauma. And her trauma lived in one name she never spoke aloud, Alden Mercer.
Lydia never remarried.
She loved Leon as if he were her own child, and she feared bringing any new influence into his life that could threaten the fragile peace she and Isabella spent years rebuilding. Isabella retired from public leadership but remained a respected advisor. Her hair turned fully silver, her voice softened, and her eyes grew wiser, though they still dimmed whenever someone mentioned Zurich, guardianship laws, or anything that vaguely reminded her of the man who once manipulated her into believing she was loved. The Greystone women built a fortress around Leon. Education at elite private schools. Hockey teams where they screened coaches.
Music lessons from trusted mentors.
Therapists disguised as academic counselors to subtly monitor his emotional well-being. They didn't want him to become suspicious, they wanted him to remain safe. But safety, no matter how carefully curated, can never predict the arrival of a ghost.
Leon's world.
In early December 2027, Leon stood on freshly resurfaced ice at the Lakefield Ice Arena, practicing slap shots before the crowd arrived for afternoon games. The arena smelled of cold metal, pine disinfectant, and hot chocolate from the small concession stand scents that defined his teenage years. Hockey wasn't just a sport for him. It was his sanctuary, the one place where his thoughts didn't wander into confusing spaces about family history. He loved the discipline of skating drills, the rhythm of blades slicing through ice, the music of puck-hitting sticks. He loved violin, equally practicing Vivaldi at sunrise, playing box partitas when insomnia visited, but hockey grounded him in a physical world that felt simpler than the labyrinth of emotions he sensed but couldn't name. That day, during a break, Leon spotted Lydia sitting in the stands. She wore a camel-colored wool coat and dark gloves, her hair slightly windblown. She waved and lifted a thermos of coffee in greeting. Her smile was genuine, and he loved her deeply for the stability she offered without ever demanding anything in return. Leon skated toward her after practice. "You're early," he said, pulling off his helmet. "I had a meeting cancelled," she replied.
"Thought I'd watch for a few minutes." He smirked. "A few minutes? You watched the entire practice."
She shrugged in a way only mothers are. Women who became mothers through circumstance knew how to. Occupational hazard.
"I'm proud of you. Sue me."
Leon laughed, unaware of the subtle pain behind her eyes.
A man living in the shadows.
While the Greystone family flourished, Alden Mercer lived a life as far from Connecticut luxury as the earth allowed. His existence unraveled slowly, like a cheap thread pulled too many times.
Fake identification cards.
Shifts as a mechanic in Bulgarian garages. Months spent driving used cars across Serbia for a black market exporter. Weeks hiding in moldy apartments in Bucharest, drinking until memories blurred. He aged violently. Permanent lines carved themselves into his forehead. His once clean haircut turned into uneven, self-trimmed wisps. His eyes, once cold with calculation, now carried the jittery tremor of a man running from the consequences he pretended no longer existed. But even in the filth of his new life, one ritual never changed. Every night, around 2 a.m., Alden opened an old laptop patched together with spare parts. The device barely functioned, but it had one purpose. He used it to search for Leon Greystone. He knew better than to search on social media with his real name, so he used VPNs, anonymous browsers, digital shadows. He scrolled through articles about Greystone Precision Works, industry conferences Lydia spoke at, charity galas Isabella sponsored. He watched news clips of Leon receiving academic awards. He watched grainy hockey footage from school tournaments. He watched violin recitals uploaded by proud parents of other students. Sometimes, he watched the videos so many times that the laptop overheated and shut down. Then he'd sit in the dark, sweating, muttering to himself. "He should have been mine. He is mine. They stole him. They stole everything." Each repetition sharpened his delusion. Each rewatch deepened his obsession. Each whisper turned into a vow. He blamed Lydia for ruining his life. He blamed Isabella for refusing to die quietly. He blamed Leon for not knowing him. It never occurred to him that he was the architect of his own destruction. And slowly, night after night, his anger grew into something twisted, something that reached beyond inheritance into the heart of revenge. The spark that lit the fuse. One night in early 2027, while browsing news about Greystone Precision's expansion into biomedical nanotechnology, Alden stumbled upon a headline. Greystone family announces new $80 million trust for future educational programs. There was a photo attached, Leon smiling, holding a scholarship certificate. He looked confident, kind, hopeful.
Everything Alden wasn't.
Something snapped in him then, fully, irreversibly. He closed the laptop slowly, almost ceremonially, and whispered, "They live like kings."
And I live like this?
No. No more. He began contacting old acquaintances from his criminal touches across Eastern Europe. Men who owed him favors.
Men with nothing to lose.
Men who would help him for the right price, for the right promise. Months passed as he gathered resources, fake passports, burner phones. He sold whatever remained of his life-old watches, stolen electronics, half-used Tolstoy by airplane tickets under a fabricated identity. By summer 2027, Alden Mercer was no longer a ghost drifting through Bulgaria. He was a ghost moving toward Connecticut. A ghost intent on taking back the life he believed was stolen. But what he wanted most wasn't money anymore. It was control. Recognition.
Domination.
And the first step of his return began with a whisper on a late September night. Leon needs to meet his father. A twisted reunion he intended to force into existence. November in Connecticut is a peculiar kind of cold, wet, creeping, the sort of chill that sinks into your bones before you even realize the temperature has changed. The forests near Sherwood Island State Park turn into a maze of bare branches that look like skeletal fingers stretching into an early dusk. Fog roams the ground freely, settling into ditches and hovering over winding roads like a faded ghost. It was on one of those roads that Lydia Greystone's world cracked open. A day that felt wrong without explaining why. On the evening of November 12, 2027, Lydia left a charity meeting in Westport. It wasn't unusual for her to stay late. She preferred avoiding crowded gatherings and often volunteered to handle follow-up paperwork after everyone else left. But that evening, something unsettled her. She couldn't name it. She simply felt a heaviness in her chest she tried to ignore. She texted Leon, who had just finished hockey practice.
On my way home. Want dinner from Bridgewater Bistro.
Leon responded instantly with a thumbs-up emoji and a steak tacos please. Lydia smiled. She loved how predictable he was. She picked up the food, chatted briefly with the restaurant owner, and then began the drive home through backroads routes she took often, the kind that felt safe simply because they were familiar. But familiarity can disguise danger better than anything else.
The road narrows.
At 8:17 p.m., fog thickened.
Pine needles scattered across the pavement danced in the wind.
Lydia slowed her SUV, switched to low beams, and turned onto a wooded lane that cut through a conservation area. Her phone buzzed with a weather alert, more fog expected, low visibility warnings.
She exhaled slowly.
Just 20 more minutes, she murmured. She never made it to 20. Halfway down the road, a pair of headlights flashed in her rearview mirror, too close, too bright. She frowned. Rarely did anyone follow this road at night. The vehicle behind her accelerated abruptly, closing the distance. A prickle crawled across her skin. "Okay, back off," she muttered, tapping her brakes lightly. The car behind her didn't slow. Instead, it surged ahead, pulled alongside her, and without warning, swerved sharply. Lydia gasped and jerked the wheel. Her SUV skidded sideways as a massive white Ford Transit van blocked the road ahead. Another dark van screeched to a stop behind her. Trapped. Both directions. Panic struck like a blow to the chest. What the? Her instincts reacted before her mind did. She hit the lock button, clutched her phone, and tried dialing 911. But a gloved hand slammed against her window. Then another. Then 3. Flashlights burst through the glass, blinding her. The last thing she saw clearly was a scare-long, slanted mark cutting across the left cheek of the man standing closest to her door. Her stomach dropped.
A scar she knew.
A scar she once saw on a man she never wanted to see again.
Alden Mercer.
He wore a black mask, but she didn't need to see the whole face. She recognized the shape of his jaw, the way he tilted his head, that cold, calculating stillness that haunted her nightmares from years ago.
No, Lydia whispered. No, no, no. The window shattered. Dragged into the dark.
The next moments unfolded in a blur of violence and fear. Someone smashed her phone. A hand covered her mouth. Someone yanked her hair back.
She tasted metal blood, maybe.
Her vision blurred as a sack was thrown over her head, plunging her world into suffocating darkness. She fought, kicking, thrashing, twisting, but 3 men pinned her down. They bound her wrists behind her, lifted her off the ground, and dragged her across gravel. She tried screaming, but a bitter-tasting cloth gag muffled it. She was Pashedno, thrown into the back of a van. Metal walls echoed as the doors slammed shut.
The engine roared to life.
Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. Terror clawed through her. Every instinct screamed fight, every memory screamed run, but there was nowhere to go it in that metal coffin on wheels. She forced herself to breathe, forced her thoughts into a single line.
Leon. Isabella.
Stay alive for them.
The warehouse. She lost track of time.
It might have been 30 minutes, or it might have been 2 hours. When the van finally stopped, she was dragged out again, her boots scraping across concrete.
A metal door screeched open.
Cold air hit her face, stale, chemical-scented, industrial.
A warehouse.
A bag was ripped off her head.
Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Cracked plaster.
Rusty beams.
Dust hanging like suspended ashes.
Lydia blinked against the glare. And then she saw him.
Alden Mercer reborn as something worse.
He stepped from the shadows like a man resurrected from decay, older, thinner, hair streaked prematurely gray, eyes sunken but burning with an intensity she had never seen before. He looked like a man who had survived wars no one wrote about. He looked like a man who blamed the world for every wound he carved into himself. But most horrifying was the expression he wore. A smile. Slow. Crocked.
Triumphant.
"Hello, Lydia," he rasped, voice roughened by years of cigarettes, alcohol, and hatred. She felt her knees weaken. She forced herself to stand taller. "Alden," she said, despite the bitter cloth drying her throat.
You re-insane.
Insane.
He laughed once short, sharp, vapid. No.
Just patient. He stepped close enough for her to see how his hands shook, not with fear, but with anticipation. "You took everything from me," he whispered, breath ragged.
Your mother, your perfect little empire, your perfect little brother.
Lydia stared at him. "Leon doesn't even know you exist." "Exactly," Alden hissed. "And that's the problem, isn't it?" He snapped his fingers. One of the masked men shoved Lydia onto a wooden chair and zip-tied her ankles. Alden crouched in front of her, eyes gleaming like a predator. "Here's how this goes," he said softly. You're going to transfer $250 million into 12 accounts. 12 countries. Clean money. My money.
Lydia spat blood onto the floor.
You'll never get a dime. He grinned. Then you'll disappear.
Just like your father.
Poof. Gone. Tragic accident.
No body found. The world tilted.
Her breath hitched. Her pulse stuttered. He knew about her father's death. He was using it against her. Alden stood, waving a hand dismissively. You have 72 hours. After that. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The threat hung between them like a noose. Meanwhile, Leon realizes something is wrong. At 10:06 p.m., Leon sat in the kitchen reheating the tacos Lydia promised to bring home. The housekeeper, an elderly woman named Janice, hovered nervously. Is she usually this late? Leon asked. Your mother's never late without texting, Janice said, wringing her hands. He checked his phone again. No messages. No calls. Just silence. A cold dread crept through his stomach. Then, headlights swayed outside. A car that wasn't Lydia's passed by. And silence returned.
Leon's breath caught.
I'm calling the police, he said. Janice nodded, tears forming.
Leon dialet 911.
My mother is missing, he said, voice steady but trembling underneath.
Something is wrong.
I know it. The response. The Connecticut State Police arrived within minutes. By midnight, the Major Crimes Division and the FBI New Haven field office were involved. They set up a temporary command post in the Greystone Mansion's study. Leon, pacing with clenched fists, told them everything he knew: her last text, her usual route, her habits, her fears, her meticulous predictability. He repeated her words from earlier.
On my way home.
She never made it. Her phone pinged once at 8:19 p.m. The moment Alden appeared on the road. Then it went offline. Commanders exchanged grim looks. Someone planned this, one agent murmured. Leon felt the room spin. He didn't know yet that the man responsible was the same ghost his family had spent years burying. But he would learn soon. And when he did, the boy who had lived a peaceful life would look into the eyes of the man who gave him DNA but nothing resembling love. And the real war would begin.
The command center inside the Greystone Mansion transformed overnight.
What had once been a polished study full of leather-bound books and awards became a battlefield of maps, digital screens, radio chatter, and the tense footsteps of investigators moving with a sense of urgency usually reserved for domestic terror cases. Missing persons in wealthy zip codes attracted attention. Missing CEOs of a multi-billion-dollar company invited an army. By sunrise, the house swarmed with specialists from the Connecticut State Police, FBI, cyberforensics units, and local officers who knew the forest roads better than GPS ever could. Leon paced the hallway outside the study, sleep-deprived but laser-focused, his hockey-calloused hands shaking as he clutched his phone. He hadn't eaten since the night before. He barely blinked. Every sound made him flinch. He kept replaying the message. On my way home. A simple sentence that felt like a ghost now. The investigators connect the first threads. Detective Joanna Haverty, a veteran with 20 years in major crimes, watched Leon closely. She saw the twitch in his jaw whenever a door opened, the way he inhaled sharply each time someone mentioned Lydia's name. Leon, she said carefully, I need you to walk me through her usual route. Every turn. He nodded, voice tight. She always takes Route 7, cuts through the Conservation Road near Sherwood Island Park. It's faster.
She hates traffic lights.
Was she afraid of anyone?
Any threats lately?
Leon hesitated.
No.
I mean, she's important, the company is huge, But Mom doesn't. She isn't the kind of person who collects enemies. Joanna's eyebrows twitched. Everyone collects enemies, Leon. Some just don't see them. He swallowed hard. She continued, did she ever mention someone from her past? Someone who left abruptly? Someone she never talked about? Leon looked down. No. She always said Dad died before I was born. That's the only thing she didn't talk much about. Joanna's gaze sharpened. Leon, I'm asking about someone else. Not your dad. A digital trail no one expected. Across the room, cyberforensic analyst Bryce Tanaka hunched over a laptop surrounded by more cables than furniture. His fingers flew over the keyboard as window after window of encrypted data scrolled across the screen. We got something, Bryce announced, voice cutting through the noise. Everyone turned. Leon froze. Bryce pointed at digital logs on a large monitor. Her phone pinged off a tower near the conservation area at 8:19 p.m. Right when she vanished. Joanna leaned in. And then... gone. Like someone smashed it. Leon's stomach clenched. Bryce continued, but here's the interesting part. The tower logged a second device in the same area. A burner phone. Signal bounced off a Bulgarian VPN. Bulgarian. Joanna repeated. Why Bulgaria? Bryce shrugged. Could be random. Could be intentional. Could be a ghost. Leon's eyes narrowed. Something in that word triggered a distant discomfort in him. He didn't know why. A letter hidden in plain sight. Around noon, Leon retreated to the guest wing, the quietest part of the Husito, gather anything that might help the investigation. He searched Lydia's office drawers, her nightstand, the shelves she meticulously organized every month. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe something she wrote. Maybe warnings she never voiced. Maybe something she feared too much to admit. He didn't expect to find a slim wooden box, tucked behind stacks of company reports. Inside the box lay a folded sheet of cream-colored stationery, the kind Isabella used for personal correspondence years ago. The ink had faded slightly, but the handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, slanted, full of emotion. The envelope wasn't sealed. Leon hesitated, then opened it. And his world tilted. It was a suicide letter uncentritten by Isabella back in 2013. He read the trembling cursive. I have committed a terrible mistake. I allowed myself to be manipulated. I allowed guilt to silence me. And because of that silence, I brought a child into this world who will never know the truth of his father. I pray Lydia forgives me. I pray Leon forgives me one day, even if he never knows why. If anything happens to me, it will be because I couldn't bear the shame. Leon's breath hitched. He read it again. And again. And again. His pulse hammered in his ears. His hands shook so violently he nearly dropped the letter. A truth he never wanted. For a moment, Leon's mind became a storm of half-formed memories. Isabella crying in the garden at night when she thought no one saw. Lydia's protective arm around him every first day of school. Conversations that ended the moment he entered the room. Whispers filled with guilt he didn't understand. He understood now. Not everything. But enough to know his life had been built on foundations rotting with secrets. A father he never knew. A lie told for protection. A danger from the past coming back to claim something, maybe him, maybe more. He felt something inside him snap, not anger, not sorrow, but a clarity sharpened by 16 years of unasked questions. He wiped his face, folded the letter carefully, and marched straight to the study. The name that changes everything. Joanna Haverty looked up as Leon entered. His face was pale but determined. I found something, he said, placing the letter on the table. As she read, her expression hardened. Investigators leaned in. Silence filled the room. Joanna asked carefully, "Leon, did your mother ever mention a man named Alden?" Leon blinked.
Who? Alden Mercer.
He shook his head.
No.
Not once.
Who is he?
Joanna sighed an exhale, weighted with years of experience, unraveling ugly truths. He was married to your sister. 14 years ago. Leon froze. Sister? He whispered.
Yes, Joanna said softly.
Not biological. But legally. Lydia is your sister, your mother's first child. Alden was her husband. He disappeared after a scandal your family kept extremely private.
Leon's lips parted.
And he's connected to me? Joanna exchanged a look with Bryce before answering. He might be your father. The room spun. Leon staggered back, gripping the table to stay upright. My father. His voice cracked. Joanna placed a steadying hand on his arm.
We don't know for certain.
But this letter, it confirms there was something dark in the past. Something your mother tried to bury. Leon's eyes filled, but he didn't cry. Not yet. He just breathed in slowly, painfully. Finally, he whispered. If he took her, I want to look him in the eyes. Just once.
The breakthrough.
At 4:21 p.m., Bryce suddenly sat up straight.
Everionelisten.
The room stilled. Bryce zoomed in on a sequence of IP addresses. They sent a test transaction, he said. The kidnappers demanded a money transfer earlier today, just a small one to verify our reaction. $100,000.
Joanna leaned closer.
Where did it go?
Bryce's fingers danced across the keys.
The screen illuminated with flags, server nodes, anonymized channels. And then, a match. A location.
Sofia, Bulgaria. Joanna stiffened.
That's not random. Bryce nodded. Yeah. Because I just cross-checked Interpol International Movement logs. Everyone held their breath. Bryce glanced at Leon before delivering the blow. Alden Mercer was sighted in Bulgaria in 2019. He used fake documents. Then vanished. The room felt colder. Leon whispered, he came back for her. Joanna looked at him with grim sympathy.
No, Leon.
He came back for all of you.
The hunt begins.
Additional agents poured into the mansion. Plans were drafted. Call logs were analyzed. Local stations were alerted.
Highways monitored.
The state police helicopter unit prepared for night search. And Leon, strangely calm, now stood in the corner, gripping the letter from his grandmother like it was a lifeline. When Joanna approached him again, he didn't look up. Instead, he said quietly, when you find him, when you find Alden, tell me.
I don't want revenge.
I don't want to hurt him. I just want him to hear one thing from me. She nodded. What's that? Leon turned, eyes sharp as shattered ice. The truth. The fourth dawn since Lydia's disappearance began with a sky the color of cold steel. Connecticut's November air carried a biting edge, pushing fog low to the ground, curling around abandoned warehouses on the outskirts of Bridgeport's old shipping district, a place once filled with manufacturing life, now inhabited by silence, rust, and the ghostly creak of metal shifting in the wind. But on this morning, the silence broke. Dozens of law enforcement vehicles glided into the area with their lights off, moving with surgical precision. FBI tactical units, Connecticut State Police, and Bridgeport SWAT formed a perimeter around a crumbling brick warehouse near the waterfront. No sirens. No shouting. Just synchronized movements, the kind reserved for hostage situations where one wrong noise could mean death. Inside the command truck, Detective Joanna Haverty studied the blueprint of the building for the 100th time. She hadn't slept in nearly 40 hours, but her mind was razor-sharp. Thermal scan picks up 3 heat signatures in the main chamber, an FBI tech said behind her. 2 on the ground level. 1 pacing. Pacing? Joanna asked. That's him. That's Alden. And the hostage? The tech asked.
Joanna exhaled slowly.
She'll be restrained. Probably toxic fumes from the space heater too. We don't have time to wait. Leon stood beside her, wearing a bulletproof vest that felt too heavy for his age, fists clenched so tightly they shook. He wasn't supposed to be here, but Joanna knew better than to try keeping him away. The boy deserved closure.
The boy deserved truth.
Stay behind me, Leon, she said firmly.
You don't go anywhere unless I tell you.
Leon nodded once, calm, but not peaceful. He had crossed a threshold the night he found Isabella's letter. He had aged 10 years in 4 days. This morning, he wasn't just a boy searching for his mother. He was someone ready to confront the ghost who had shaped his life without ever being part of it.
Inside the warehouse.
The warehouse interior smelled of motor oil, coal dust, and the metallic stench of old pipes. On the cracked concrete floor, Lydia Greystone sat bound to a metal chair, hands zip-tied behind her back. Her lips were cracked, her skin pale, but her eyes, those fierce Greystone eyes, were alive with defiance. Across the room, Alden Mercer paced like an animal trapped between hunger and fear. He had aged in jagged lines, wrinkles he hadn't earned honorably, twitches that came from too many years hiding in dirty apartments, a limping gait from fights he had never spoken about. But there was one thing unchanged. His obsession. He gripped a rusted revolver, spinning it around his finger like a toy, muttering to himself. They think they won, he whispered. They think they erased me. But they can't erase blood.
Blood doesn't disappear.
Lydia watched him, breathing slowly. You don't need to do this, she said quietly. Alden stopped pacing. Oh, Lydia, he said, widening his arms theatrically. You really don't know when to shut up.
You stole everything.
I built that fortune with Yumi ideas, my systems, my years. And what did I get? Nothing. You took Leon. You poisoned him against me before he even knew my name. Lydia's voice was hoarse but steady. He never needed to know your name.
Alden's face twisted.
And that's exactly why I'm here. He stepped close, pressing the cold barrel of the revolver against her forehead.
Once you gone, once the world cries over the tragic disappearance of the great Lydia Greystone, I'll take back what's mine. I'll tell Leon the truth.
I'll be the father he never had. Lydia didn't flinch. You'll never touch him. Alden's smile was a fracture of sanity. We'll see. The breach. From outside, Leon saw his mother's silhouette through a warehouse window. His breath froze in his throat. His vision tunneled, heartbeat thundering in his ears. Joanna whispered, "We're going in. Now." She raised her fist. SWAT units poised. Bomb techs prepared flashbangs. Then, breach.
A battering ram smashed through the side door.
Flashbangs exploded in violent white bursts. Shouts echoed. Federal agents. Hands where we can see them. Drop the weapon. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Lydia squeezed her eyes shut. Alden whirled around in blind rage. No, he bellowed. No, not now. He grabbed Lydia, yanked her chair sideways, sending her crashing to the ground. Dust exploded into the air.
The revolver clattered away, but Alden dove for it. Leon broke formation. Leon.
Joanna shouted, but he was already sprinting. Lydia gasped, "No, stay back." But Leon didn't stop. He couldn't stop. He saw Alden's hand wrap around the revolver. Saw the man rise to his knees. Saw the muzzle swing toward Lydia. Saw Alden's finger tightening on the trigger. Time slowed.
The air thickened.
Leon lunged. But SWAT reached him first. 3 officers tackled Alden with brutal efficiency.
Alden screamed a raw, primal sound.
As he was pinned, disarmed, zip-tied, and dragged across the concrete. "Get off me!" he shrieked. "He's my son. He's mine." Leon stood frozen, chest heaving, as officers cut Lydia free from the chair. She collapsed into his arms. He held her so tightly that for a moment they were one silhouette, trembling together under the flickering warehouse lights. "Mom," Leon whispered, voice cracking. "I'm here. I've got you." Lydia wept into his shoulder. "I knew you'd find me," she whispered. "I knew."
Father and son for the first and last time.
As Alden was dragged outside, his eyes locked onto Leon, fierce, desperate, wild. "Leon!" he shouted.
"Leon, look at me. I am your father.
"I'm the one who gave you life."
Don T, you want answers? Don T, you want the truth?"
Leon stepped forward, stopping just outside the ring of officers. Alden strained against the zip ties until they cut into his skin. "Say something," he begged.
"Say something to your father."
Leon's expression didn't waver. He walked until only a police barricade separated them. Then he spoke, voice calm, steady, devastating. "My father died before I was born." Alden's face contorted in disbelief.
No, Don T, say that. Don T, you dare."
Leon continued, tone colder.
"You re not my father.
You're the mistake my family survived."
Alden's scream tore through the air.
"You're mine. You're mine."
"You can't erase me."
But officers shoved him into an armored vehicle, slammed the door shut, and his voice cut off like a faulty machine. It was over. Not elegantly. Not peacefully. But completely. The trial and the sentence.
The trial drew national attention.
Crimes included kidnapping, attempted murder, extortion, flight from justice,
destruction of evidence, federal racketeering.
Multiple counts from his years overseas. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The defense barely attempted insanity.
The verdict from the U.S.
District Court came swiftly. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Alden didn't attend the final hearing. He refused to be brought into the courtroom. He refused to see Leon. He refused to see Lydia. He died in federal prison in 2041, skin yellowed from illness, lungs shredded by decades of cheap cigarettes. No visitors. No letters. No gravestone with a name. The prison chaplain chose one line for the anonymous marker. "Here lies a man who loved money more than his soul."
Healing the scars.
Life for the Greystone family became quieter after the trial. And in that quiet, healing took root. Leon returned to school. Finished his hockey season. Played violin again for the first time since his mother vanished. He graduated with near-perfect marks, earning admission to New York University School of Law, specializing in criminal justice. He wanted to understand the minds of men like Alden, not out of vengeance, but out of a desire to make sure no one else suffered from monsters hiding behind charm and manipulation. Every year on December 21st, his birthday, Leon visited 2 women. His mother, Lydia, who survived what should have broken her. And his grandmother, Isabella, who died years after the ordeal but whose memory remained a quiet guardian over their lives. He always brought white lilies, her favorite. A new beginning. Years later, when Leon turned 30, the Greystone mansion finally felt peaceful. Snow drifted gently outside the tall windows, dusting the pines with soft white. Inside the living room, a fireplace crackled with warmth. Leon stood by the window holding his newborn son Tiny, sleeping, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. The child breathed softly, unaware of the history carried in his name. Lydia, her hair fully silver now, stepped beside him and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did well," she whispered. "You broke the cycle. You gave him a life without secrets." Leon turned, kissed his son's head, and whispered, "We're free now." Outside, snow continued to fall, quiet, forgiving, almost sacred. For the first time in his life, Leon watched winter arrive without feeling cold.